Zex Toral's dismissive laughter echoed through the command deck of the Inevitable Dominance, causing several junior officers to nervously join in despite not fully understanding the joke. The massive viewscreen displayed a magnified image of Earth's International Space Station, rotating slowly against the blue-green backdrop of humanity's homeworld. "Look at this pathetic construction," Zex Toral sneered, his four eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of amusement in Kraxian body language. Assembled piece by piece like children's toys, exposed solar panels that could be shattered by a single micrometeorite, and no defensive capabilities whatsoever. And this is supposedly their crowning achievement. Vexamore, his senior tactical advisor, shifted uncomfortably. Though he'd never contradict the High Commander openly, something about the humans' transmissions had been bothering him. "High Commander, if I may suggest a thorough anthropological assessment before." "Before what?" Zex Toral interrupted, rising from his command throne. His imposing 3-meter frame towered over the advisor. "Before we claim a resource-rich system protected by creatures who have barely mastered the art of leaving their own atmosphere. The Imperium didn't become the dominant force in 3 spiral arms by hesitating, Vexamore." He gestured to a secondary display showing intercepted broadcasts from Earth, fragmentary communications revealing military vessels, civilian transports, and mining ships. Their mightiest warships use primitive chemical propellants. Their communications are unencrypted. They waste resources on. "What is this?" He paused, puzzled by one particular image. Vessels designed purely for recreation, moving through their oceans for no purpose but pleasure. "They call them cruise ships," High Commander offered a cultural analysis officer. "The species appears to value leisure activities to an unusual degree." Zex Toral's mandibles clicked in what might have been disgust or amusement. A civilization that builds ships for idle amusement rather than conquest or resource acquisition. He turned to his fleet coordinator. "Dispatch Battle Group 7 under Sub-Commander Vrak. This hardly warrants interrupting our main campaign against the Centauri Accord." The coordinator bowed deeply. "Battle Group 7 consists of 12 warships, High Commander. Is that not excessive for such a primitive world?" "Perhaps," Zex Toral conceded with a casual wave of his upper limbs. "But it will provide valuable combat experience for Vrak's crew. They've only participated in 3 planetary subjugations. Besides, I want this matter resolved quickly. The Emperor expects the Centauri situation concluded by the next galactic rotation." As the command crew busied themselves with preparations, Zex Toral returned to his throne, activating a private communication channel to Sub-Commander Vrak. The younger officer's image appeared instantly, his posture straightening to perfect attention upon seeing the High Commander. "Vrak, I'm sending you to claim a newly discovered system. The native species presents no significant challenge. Their vessels are worthless against even our scout ships. Consider this an opportunity to demonstrate your efficiency." Vrak's eyes gleamed with ambition. "I am honored, High Commander. Any special instructions regarding the indigenous population?" Zex Toral considered for a moment. "Standard procedure. Neutralize their meager defenses, establish orbital dominance, then offer the usual terms of surrender. The Imperium can always use more labor for the mineral extraction colonies." He chuckled darkly. "Though from what I've observed, these humans may be too fragile even for basic mining work." "Understood, High Commander. We will not fail." Vrak's image disappeared. Inevitable Dominance adjusted its position at the edge of the Sol system, still beyond the range of human detection. Zex Toral had already dismissed the upcoming conquest from his mind, turning his attention back to the strategic challenges of the Centauri campaign. This human matter would be a footnote in his glorious record, not even worthy of personal mention in his report to the Emperor. On the far side of Neptune, undetected by the Kraxian sensors, Lieutenant Commander Jackson Hayes sat motionless in the dimly lit communications hub of Outpost Galileo. The distant monitoring station, disguised as a scientific research facility, housed Earth's most advanced long-range detection equipment. Hayes had been monitoring unusual gravimetric disturbances for 3 days when the alien transmissions began. At first, he thought the translation matrix was malfunctioning. The arrogance displayed by these unknown entities seemed almost comical in its extremity. But as more data filtered through, cold reality settled in his stomach like a stone. "Decryption confirmed, sir," announced Specialist Jessica Moore, her face paled in the blue glow of her console. "Transmission authenticity at 99.8%. They're really out there, and are really planning to attack." Hayes nodded grimly, his fingers already composing the emergency priority message to Earth Command. "And they really think this will be easy." He attached the translated alien transmission, including Zex Toral's dismissive assessment of human vessels, and sent it through the quantum communication array. God help them. They have no idea what they're about to start. The message raced across the solar system, encoded in quantum particles that couldn't be intercepted or decoded by conventional means, one of many technologies the Craxians had assumed beyond human capability. As Hayes watched the transmission confirmation, he allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Terran vessels are worthless. Ha!" he murmured to himself. "We'll see about that." Captain Olivia Rodriguez pressed her palm against the cool viewport of the Peregrine, watching as Europa's fractured ice surface glowed faintly in Jupiter's reflected light. The patrol vessel had powered down to minimal life support, their position within a massive subsurface crevasse, masking their heat signature from the Craxian scout ship now orbiting the moon. "Status report," she whispered, though there was no practical reason for silence in the vacuum between their hull and the ice above. Lieutenant Marcus Wilson, her tactical officer, responded in an equally hushed tone. "Craxian vessel maintaining standard orbit, approximately 230 kilometers above Europa's surface. They're conducting deep scans of the ice sheet, but their sensor calibration isn't designed for penetrating this type of terrain. We're effectively invisible as long as we maintain current power levels." "And how long can we maintain those levels?" Rodriguez asked. Dr. Benjamin Marshall looked up from his makeshift sensor array, cobbled together from the ship's standard equipment and his own research instruments. The exobiologist had been assigned to the Peregrine for what was supposed to be a routine sampling mission of Europa's subsurface ocean. Now he was their best chance at understanding the alien technology. "Life support will hold for another 36 hours, Marshall replied. "After that, we'll need to power up the secondary generators. That would increase our thermal signature by about 20%. Rodriguez nodded. "Let's hope our visitor doesn't stick around that long." The bridge fell silent as they watched the massive alien vessel through their passive sensors. The Craxian scout ship was elegant in its deadliness, a curved asymmetrical design that somehow managed to look both biological and mechanical, with iridescent hull plating that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. "It's beautiful," whispered Ensign Kelly Davis, their youngest crew member. "So are Portuguese man-o'-wars and inland taipans," Rodriguez replied. "The deadliest things often are." Marshall adjusted his instruments, his expression suddenly changing. "Captain, I'm picking up something interesting. Their shield harmonics fluctuate on a regular pattern. About every 72 seconds, there's a microsecond variance in the field strength near what appears to be their propulsion system." "A vulnerability?" Wilson asked eagerly. "Not exactly," Marshall said, fingers flying across his console. "More like an efficiency trade-off. They've optimized their shields for broad-spectrum protection, but sacrificed perfect uniformity. It's actually quite clever. Unless you know exactly where and when to look for the fluctuation, you'd never notice it." Rodriguez leaned over his shoulder, studying the readings. "And if you did know?" Marshall rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Theoretically, with precisely timed and focused energy delivery, you might create a resonance cascade. Their entire shield would still be at 99.98% effectiveness, but that 0.02% might be enough to..." "To what?" Wilson prompted. "To get a message through, or a small projectile. Maybe even a specially shielded boarding pod," Marshall's eyes widened at his own speculation. Not that we have any of those technologies. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Not yet. The Peregrine's communication officer, Lieutenant Sarah Daniels, suddenly stiffened in her seat. Captain, I'm intercepting a transmission from the Craxian vessel. It's not encrypted. They don't think there's anyone out here capable of understanding them, Rodriguez realized. Put it through. The alien language filled the bridge. Harsh, clicking sounds interspersed with resonant tones. The ship's rudimentary translation matrix struggled to make sense of it, but fragments came through clearly enough. No sign of advanced technology. Primitive outposts on 4th planet and natural satellite. Main habitation on 3rd planet appears vulnerable. Defensive capabilities minimal. Rodriguez's expression hardened. They're cataloging us like specimens, preparing for invasion. Marshall continued monitoring his instruments, recording every scrap of data about the alien ship. Captain, they're deploying some kind of automated probe toward Europa's surface. Will it detect us? Wilson asked, hand hovering over the emergency thruster controls. Marshall shook his head. I don't think so. It appears designed for chemical analysis, not deep scanning. But it'll pass within 3 kilometers of our position. Rodriguez considered their options. Running would reveal their presence. Staying hidden was their best tactical choice, but it meant missing an opportunity. Dr. Marshall, would it be possible to passively scan that probe when it passes? Get detailed readings on its composition and technology without activating our main sensors. The scientist blinked in surprise. We'd need to reconfigure our magnetometer array, use Jupiter's ambient radiation as a passive illumination source. He trailed off, already calculating. Yes, it could work. Do it, Rodriguez ordered. Wilson, coordinate with engineering. I want every scrap of data we can get without revealing ourselves. As the crew rushed to prepare, Rodriguez settled into her command chair, her mind racing ahead to what would come next. The aliens clearly believed humanity posed no threat, their overconfidence evidenced by their unencrypted transmissions and casual approach to scouting. Let them think we're primitive, she murmured. Let them think our vessels are worthless. Their arrogance will be our first weapon. Outside, Jupiter's massive form filled half the sky, its great red spot slowly rotating into view like a watchful eye. The Craxian ship continued its methodical survey, utterly unaware that its every movement, every energy signature, every communication was being meticulously documented by the supposedly primitive humans hiding in the ice below. Admiral Leah Washington stood motionless before the circular holographic table in New Geneva's underwater command center, 300 meters beneath Lake Geneva's placid surface. The facility, constructed in secret following the lunar accords a decade earlier, served as humanity's last resort command post in case of planetary invasion. None of its architects had truly believed it would ever serve its intended purpose. Until now. The Craxian force is approximately 72 hours from Mars orbit, she announced to the assembled commanders. The holographic display shifted, showing the projected path of the alien battle group. Thanks to Lieutenant Commander Hayes and the crew of the Peregrine, we have some understanding of their capabilities. They outclass us in every conventional metric of space warfare. A heavy silence fell over the room. These men and women represented Earth's finest military minds, yet the scale of the threat left them momentarily speechless. General Thomas Blackwood of the North American Space Force was the first to speak. Conventional metrics, he repeated thoughtfully. But what about unconventional ones? Washington allowed herself a slight smile. Precisely, General. Conventional warfare is a contest of matched capabilities, shield strength versus weapon power, maneuverability versus targeting systems. But humanity has a long history of prevailing against superior forces through asymmetric approaches. She tapped a control, and the display shifted to show Earth's combined defensive assets, a hodgepodge of national space forces, corporate security vessels, and civilian craft. We have 147 military vessels with varying combat capabilities, 832 civilian ships that could be pressed into service, and 41 space stations with potential defensive applications. Commander Elena Vasquez of the Pan-American Alliance studied the display with narrowed eyes. If we fight them ship to ship, we lose. Period. But if we fight them our way. Exactly. Washington nodded. Dr. Marshall's analysis of their shield harmonic fluctuations gives us our first opening. Their technology is impressive but optimized for fighting opponents similar to themselves. They've never encountered humanity's chaotic approach to problem solving. She gestured to the representatives from global tech corporations seated at the far end of the table. Our private sector partners have been briefed. They're already working to adapt commercial technologies for military applications. Marcus Chen, CEO of Orbital Dynamics, leaned forward. My company's satellite service drones can be reprogrammed for coordinated microwave attacks, targeting the specific shield fluctuations the Peregrine identified. Individually, they're harmless. Together, focused on a single point during that microsecond fluctuation. And my company's mining lasers, added Sofia Rodriguez of Helios Extraction. They're designed for precision cutting of asteroid materials, not weapons, but at the right frequency and with targeting data from the military. Washington nodded. This is humanity's advantage. Our fragmented development, which the Kraxians see as primitive inefficiency, means we've explored technological paths they never considered. The holographic display shifted again, showing dozens of disparate human technologies beginning to interconnect in new configurations. Civilian communication satellites repurposed as electromagnetic pulse platforms. Tourism spacecraft retrofitted with experimental shield systems originally designed for atmospheric re-entry. Weather modification platforms recalibrated to focus solar radiation. We have 72 hours, Washington continued. I'm hereby authorizing Emergency Protocol Chimera. All restrictions on experimental weapons technology are suspended. All private vessels are subject to military requisition. All classified research projects with potential defensive applications are to be fast-tracked for immediate deployment. Colonel James Harrison of European Space Defense raised his hand. Admiral, some of those experimental technologies haven't completed safety testing. The casualty rates could be significant. Noted, Colonel, Washington replied solemnly. But if the Kraxians reach Earth, the casualty rate will be total. I'm not asking anyone to make sacrifices I wouldn't make myself. She paused, letting her gaze travel around the room. I'll be commanding the first defensive wave personally. The announcement sent a ripple of murmurs through the chamber. An officer of Washington's rank typically coordinated from a secure command post, not the front lines. Our enemy believes our vessels are worthless, she continued, her voice cutting through the whispers. That our technology is primitive, our military doctrine unsophisticated. They expect us to behave like every other species they've conquered, to present a unified, predictable defense that they can methodically dismantle. She straightened to her full height, her weathered face illuminated by the holographic glow. Instead, they'll face something they've never encountered before. Humanity unleashed. Every nation, every corporation, every research lab throwing different solutions at them simultaneously. We won't fight as a single entity, but as thousands of independent problem solvers all attacking from different angles. Washington's finger traced the alien battle group's projected path. Here, in Mars orbit, is where we introduce them to humanity's true nature. And by the time they realize their error in dismissing us, it will already be too late. As the assembled leaders dispersed to their respective commands, the admiral remained at the holographic table, studying the enemy's approach. Behind her, the global production networks had already begun to transform. Factories from Shanghai to Sao Paulo shifting to war footing. Research labs worldwide working feverishly to weaponize technologies never designed for combat. Terran vessels are worthless, she whispered, echoing Zex Toral's fatal misjudgment. We'll see about that. Sub-Commander Vrak positioned himself at the center of the dominant Justice's command deck, ensuring the ship's recording devices captured his most flattering angle. The upcoming victory transmission to High Commander Xtorald required perfect staging, a balance of military precision and humble confidence that would advance his standing in the Imperium's complex hierarchy. Battle Formation Crack 7. He ordered as his 12 warships approached the Red Planet. Deploy sensory drones to maximum dispersal pattern. His first officer, Lekmor, executed the commands with practiced efficiency. The holographic tactical display showed their warships arranging themselves into the time-tested formation that had broken planetary defenses across 17 star systems. Preliminary scans complete, Sub-Commander, reported the sensor officer. We detect 18 primitive defense satellites in orbit and a small outpost on the larger moon. The planet itself has 3 small settlements, primarily focused on resource extraction. Minimal defensive capabilities detected. Vrak's secondary mandibles clicked in satisfaction. As expected, these humans barely understand the principles of interplanetary travel, let alone warfare. He gestured to the communications officer. Prepare to broadcast surrender terms once we've neutralized their orbital defenses. The first anomaly appeared as they passed the outer moon's orbit. The ship's primary communication network experienced an unusual disruption, not the expected primitive jamming attempt, but something altogether different. Sub-Commander, the communications officer called, confusion evident in her voice. Our channels are being flooded with information packets. They appear to be human entertainment broadcasts, mathematical sequences, and recipes for food preparation. Vrak dismissed this with an irritated wave. A primitive attempt at electronic warfare. Purge the system and re-establish the command network. Before the officer could comply, the tactical display erupted with warning indicators. The previously empty space around Mars suddenly bloomed with signatures of approaching vessels, appearing from behind the planet's moons, emerging from the sensor shadow of the planet itself, and some seemingly materializing from nowhere as they powered up from dormant states. Tactical analysis. Vrak demanded, his perfect posture faltering slightly. The tactical officer's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in confusion. I cannot provide a coherent analysis, Sub-Commander. The human vessels follow no recognizable formation. Some are military designs, others appear to be civilian craft. Their approach vectors are chaotic. On the main view screen, the human fleet became visible, a bewildering collection of vessels ranging from sleek military frigates to bulky mining platforms. Some advanced with obvious weapon systems deployed, while others appeared completely unarmed. No 2 ships seemed to follow the same approach protocol. They're attempting to confuse our targeting systems with unpredictable movements, Vrak concluded confidently. A basic tactic, counter with standard overwhelming force protocol. The order had barely left his mouth when 3 events occurred simultaneously. A swarm of what appeared to be maintenance drones, each no larger than a Krakshin escape pod, suddenly accelerated toward his rearmost cruiser. Instead of impacting, they attached themselves to the ship's sensor array and began emitting a peculiar energy pattern. The Righteous Fury reports complete sensor failure, Lekmor announced with disbelief. They're effectively blind. At the same moment, a focused beam from what their database identified as a weather modification satellite lanced out from Mars orbit, targeting a specific 7-meter section of the dominant Justice's forward shield. The beam itself wasn't powerful enough to threaten their defenses, but it struck precisely during a microsecond fluctuation in their shield harmonics that Dr. Marshall had identified. The resulting energy cascade sent power surges through the flagship's forward sections, temporarily disabling their primary weapons array. Most disturbingly, the targeting systems across Vrak's entire battle group suddenly began identifying every object in the vicinity, including other Krakshian vessels, as hostile contacts. What is happening? Vrak demanded, his carefully rehearsed victory speech forgotten as warning indicators flooded his command console. Multiple system failures reported across the fleet, Lekmor replied, struggling to maintain composure. The humans are using. Sub-Commander, they're using our own shield frequencies against us. Somehow they've identified the harmonic pattern and a violent explosion cut off his explanation as one of their escort vessels, the Inevitable Conquest, erupted in flames. What appeared to be an unarmed human cargo hauler had approached it on a seemingly random vector, then released a cloud of metallic particles precisely calibrated to the cruiser's shield frequency. The particles had passed through it as if the powerful shields didn't exist, carrying with them what humans would recognize as simple thermite charges, ancient technology that required no advanced power systems to devastating effect. Impossible, Vrak muttered as his supposedly impregnable flagship listed to starboard, secondary explosions cascading through decks that human weapons should never have been able to penetrate. These are just primitive vessels, worthless against our technology. His tactical display showed 3 more Kraxian ships suffering critical systems failures as the human vessels continued their incomprehensible attack patterns. A hospital ship, clearly marked with human medical symbols, had somehow projected an electromagnetic pulse that precisely matched the neural frequencies of Kraxian crew interfaces, causing crippling feedback for the operators. As the dominant Justice shuddered under another precisely targeted attack, Vrak activated the Quantum Entanglement Communicator, a direct line to High Commander Zextoral that couldn't be intercepted or jammed. "High Commander," he began, all thoughts of career advancement forgotten. "We are under attack by human forces near the 4th planet. Their capabilities have been significantly underestimated." Across the void, Zextoral received the transmission with stunned disbelief. On his tactical display, he watched as Vrak's battle group, 12 of the Imperium's finest warships, disintegrated under an assault that defied all tactical prediction algorithms. For the first time in his illustrious career, the High Commander felt something unfamiliar creep into his consciousness. Doubt. Admiral Olivia Rodriguez watched the tactical display aboard the retrofitted Peregrine with intense focus. What had once been a simple patrol vessel now served as Earth's forward command center, its systems enhanced with a mixture of cutting-edge human technology and reverse-engineered Kraxian components, salvaged from debris after the Mars engagement. Zextoral's main fleet has passed lunar orbit, reported Lieutenant Amanda Chen, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. 83 warships in standard Kraxian assault formation. They've adjusted their shield harmonics based on our previous attacks. Rodriguez nodded, unsurprised. As expected, they're adapting. But they're adapting to what they think we did, not what we actually did. She tapped her communication earpiece. All vessels execute Operation Sandstorm. Authentication code, Thermopylae. Across Earth's orbital space, the assembled human defense force acknowledged the command. Unlike the chaotic approach at Mars, this formation appeared almost conventional, a layered defensive screen protecting Earth from the approaching Kraxian armada. It was exactly what Zextoral would expect from a species that had learned a bitter lesson about superior firepower. It was also a complete deception. The High Commander's flagship is advancing to optimal firing position, Chen announced. They're charging what appears to be their primary weapon system. Rodriguez allowed herself a small smile. Right where we want them. Dr. Marshall, are you ready? Dr. Benjamin Marshall looked up from his modified sensor station, eyes tired but determined. He hadn't slept in 3 days, working to perfect his analysis of the Kraxian technology. The gravitational lensing calculations are complete. All 26 weather control satellites are aligned. On your command, Admiral. In high orbit around Earth, Zextoral watched with cold satisfaction as his mighty fleet approached the human defensive screen. The primitives had arranged themselves in a recognizable defensive posture. Clearly, they had learned something from the Mars debacle and were attempting to fight in a more conventional manner. Their vessels remain primitive, he announced to his bridge crew, mandibles clicking in amusement. They've made some adaptations, but nothing that can withstand our full attack capability. Prepare the dimensional cascade weapon. The Inevitable Dominance hummed with power as its primary weapon system charge. capable of collapsing gravitational stability across an entire continental plate. It would force an immediate surrender from the humans, those that survived. At least, High Commander, his tactical officer reported, the humans appear to be powering up defensive systems. Their energy signatures are unusual. Zextoral dismissed the concern. They've cobbled together some new defenses from studying our technology. Impressive for primitives, but futile. The first sign that something was wrong came when his shield harmonics officer reported an anomaly. High Commander, we're detecting focused solar radiation being redirected toward our position. A primitive energy weapon, Zextoral scoffed. Our shields can withstand the energy output of their entire planet. No, sir, the officer replied, confusion evident. It's not a weapon. They're using their weather control satellites to create a gravitational lens effect, focusing the sun's radiation on specific points in space. Before Zextoral could process this information, the human fleet executed a maneuver that defied tactical logic. Instead of maintaining their defensive screen, the vessels suddenly dispersed in all directions, creating corridors of empty space leading directly to Earth. They're retreating, exclaimed his first officer. No, Zextoral replied slowly, his tactical instincts finally registering danger. It's a trap. Too late, he realized what the humans had done. The focused solar radiation wasn't aimed at his ships. It was precisely heating specific regions of space, creating localized differences in gravitational density. As his fleet passed through these invisible distortions, their advanced sensors detected nothing, but their navigation systems began to fail in subtle, cascading ways. Evasive maneuvers, Zextoral commanded. But the order came too late. From the supposedly empty corridors, hundreds of small objects accelerated toward the Craxian fleet. Not missiles or fighters, but civilian mining drones, each loaded with a simple payload of metal particles precisely calibrated to the specific shield frequency of its target. Simultaneously, what appeared to be unarmed human passenger vessels suddenly activated previously concealed weapon systems. Not energy weapons, but electromagnetic pulse generators originally designed for dispersing atmospheric storms, now modified to create resonance cascades in Craxian shield generators. Most devastating of all, the dauntless Fisherman I, a small fishing vessel hastily converted for space operations, executed what would later be called the Hampton Maneuver. Captain Michael Hampton, a commercial fisherman with no military training, had proposed a theoretical approach based on his experience with sonar evasion techniques. By precisely matching his vessel's shield harmonics to the inevitable dominance's frequency, he created a momentary bubble of matched resonance, a small area where the two shields recognized each other as identical and thus permitted matter to pass. The resulting explosion as his vessel impacted the flagship's primary weapon array rocked the mighty ship, killing hundreds of crew members and leaving a gaping wound in its supposedly impenetrable hull. How? Zextoral demanded of his science officer as secondary explosions racked his vessel. How is this possible? They have no unified government, no unified military doctrine. Their tactics make no sense. The science officer had no answer as another explosion shook the mighty vessel. The tactical display showed a scene of impossible chaos. Craxian warships, the pride of the Imperium, crippled or destroyed by vessels that by all rational analysis should have posed no threat whatsoever. The humans, the science officer finally managed, his voice hollow with dawning comprehension. They're not fighting according to any recognizable doctrine. Each vessel appears to be executing independent tactical decisions based on creativity. As if to emphasize his point, a human vessel cobbled together from what appeared to be 3 different ship designs suddenly emerged from behind Earth's moon, its hull now incorporating salvaged Craxian technology. Its weapons fired in a pattern that precisely exploited the new weakness created by the dauntless fisherman's sacrifice. For the first time in his long career, High Commander Zextoral felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Zextoral stood amid the wreckage of the inevitable dominance's auxiliary command center, the primary bridge having been destroyed in the human attack. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the faces of his surviving officers as damage control teams fought to stabilize the flagship's critical systems. "Status report," he demanded, his voice unnaturally calm despite the chaos surrounding him. His tactical officer, one of the few senior staff to survive the bridge collapse, straightened despite his injuries. 53 vessels remain operational, High Commander. We've withdrawn to Earth's L5 Lagrange point to regroup. Engineering teams are working to reconfigure our shields based on analysis of the human attack patterns. Sextoral nodded curtly. And the humans. They've suffered losses as well. Approximately 38 vessels destroyed or disabled. However, they're adapting at an unprecedented rate. The officer hesitated. "High Commander, they're salvaging our damaged ships. We've detected boarding parties on at least 7 of our disabled cruisers." This news sent a ripple of unease through the command center. Craxian military doctrine mandated self-destruction rather than allowing technology to fall into enemy hands. That so many crippled vessels had failed to follow this protocol spoke to the devastating effectiveness of the human assault. "Show me," Sextoral ordered. The tactical display flickered to life, showing real-time footage from a Craxian surveillance drone. A human vessel, clearly assembled from disparate components, had docked with the drifting hulk of the cruiser Inevitable Conquest. Suited figures moved through the wreckage with surprising efficiency, systematically removing components and transferring them to their ship. "How long since they began salvage operations?" Sextoral asked. "Approximately 4 hours, High Commander." "And how long until our engineering teams complete the shield reconfiguration?" "Estimated completion in 6 hours." Sextoral's mandibles clicked in agitation. "Unacceptable. I want those shields reconfigured in 2 hours. Divert all non-essential power and personnel to the engineering section." As his orders were relayed, Sextoral turned to the science officer. "Explain this," he demanded, gesturing to the footage of human salvage teams. "How are they able to interface with our technology so quickly? Even advanced species we've conquered required months to reverse engineer Craxian systems." The science officer's multiple eyes blinked nervously. "I believe it relates to their fragmented development path, High Commander. While we evolved through perfect iteration, each technological advancement building directly upon established principles, the humans developed in chaotic, often redundant patterns. Their different nations, and even private entities pursued similar goals via wildly different approaches." "And this is advantageous?" Sextoral asked incredulously. "In this specific context, yes. They don't need to understand our technology completely. They only need to recognize functional patterns similar to concepts they've already explored from different angles. They're not reverse engineering so much as adapting and incorporating." On the tactical display, the surveillance drone captured a human vessel firing what was unmistakably a Craxian energy weapon. Just hours after salvaging it, the weapon had been crudely integrated into the human ship's systems, operating at perhaps 60% of its designed capability, but it was functioning. "Impossible," muttered Sextoral's first officer. "They shouldn't be able to power our weapons without understanding the quantum field matrices." "They're not using our power systems," the science officer observed with reluctant admiration. "They bypassed them entirely and connected our weapon directly to their fusion reactors. It's inefficient and likely dangerous to their own vessel, but effective," Sextoral finished grimly. The tactical display shifted to a new alert. Jackson Hayes, now commanding the rapid response vessel Thunderchild, led a boarding action against a disabled Craxian shield generator platform. The human commander moved with practiced precision, his team using cutting tools and explosive charges to access the generator's core. "We need to counterattack immediately," urged the tactical officer, "before they can adapt more of our technology." Sextoral considered this. Standard Craxian doctrine would indeed call for an immediate counteroffensive to prevent further technology transfer. But standard doctrine had failed spectacularly against these humans. No, he decided, we will complete our defensive adaptations first. The humans have shown they can exploit any weakness in our systems. We will not advance until our shields and weapons have been reconfigured to patterns they cannot anticipate. High Commander, objected his first officer, the longer we wait, the more of our technology they will salvage. And the more time we have to study their attack patterns, Sex Toral countered. Begin comprehensive analysis of all human tactics from both engagements. I want to understand their thought processes, how they develop these unpredictable approaches. On the display, the human boarding team successfully extracted the shield generator's control matrix. Within 90 minutes, engineering teams on the Thunderchild had not only deciphered its operation, but improved its efficiency by removing safety limiters the Craxians considered essential. Zextoral watched with mounting unease as a human vessel, clearly assembled from parts of 3 different ship designs, plus Craxian technology, successfully repelled an attack from one of his scout ships. The human vessel employed a hybrid defense system that combined Craxian shield technology with what appeared to be repurposed industrial mining lasers. High Commander, the science officer said quietly, I believe we may have significantly underestimated these humans. Your assessment is noted, Zextoral replied coldly. But as he turned away from the display, a troubling thought formed in his mind, one that no Craxian military commander had entertained in 12 centuries of imperial expansion. What if we cannot win? The command deck of the inevitable dominance had been transformed. Where once ornate holographic displays and comfortable command stations had dominated the space, now exposed conduits and hastily installed replacement systems created a chaotic patchwork of technology. Zextoral stood before the assembled remnants of his command staff, his proud posture unchanged despite the deteriorating situation. The humans expect us to retreat, he announced, silencing the murmurs among his officers. They believe they have broken our will to fight. They are mistaken. A tactical display activated, showing the Craxian fleet's new position near Neptune's orbit. Over half the original 80 ships had been destroyed or disabled, a catastrophic loss unheard of in the Imperium's history. Our analysis of human attack patterns is complete, continued Zextoral. They excel at identifying and exploiting specific weaknesses through unpredictable tactical approaches. However, they cannot counter what they cannot detect or understand. He gestured to his chief weapons officer. Explain the dimensional cascade device. The weapons officer stepped forward, activating a detailed schematic. The dimensional cascade device operates on principles beyond anything humans have encountered. It creates localized distortions in spacetime that collapse planetary tectonic stability. Unlike conventional weapons, it leaves infrastructure intact while rendering a planet uninhabitable. And unlike our standard weapons systems, added Zextoral, it requires no external shield penetration. The effect propagates through dimensional space before manifesting in normal spacetime. The humans have no defense against this technology. His senior advisor, recently promoted after the death of his predecessor, spoke hesitantly. High Commander, protocol dictates we should withdraw and await reinforcements. The humans have proven more resourceful than anticipated. Reinforcements would take 47 days to arrive. Zextoral replied coldly. By then, the humans will have further adapted our technology. Our best option remains immediate, decisive action. He turned to the navigation officer. Set course for optimal deployment position. We will end this conflict with a single demonstration of power. As the might inevitable dominance and its remaining escort vessels began their approach, Zextoral remained unaware of a critical fact. The Peregrine, Captain Rodriguez's command vessel, had been shadowing the flagship since the first engagement. Using techniques developed by Dr. Benjamin Marshall, the human ship hid within the dimensional ripples created by the Craxian's own engines, invisible to conventional sensors and virtually undetectable even to advanced Craxian detection systems. From this hidden vantage, Rodriguez and her crew had observed and recorded every meeting, every repair operation, and most importantly, every detail of the dimensional cascade weapons preparation. This information streamed continuously to Earth via an experimental quantum entanglement communicator salvaged from a damaged Craxian cruiser. In a secure laboratory beneath the Pacific Ocean, Dr. Melissa Park, a theoretical physicist whose work on dimensional mechanics had been largely dismissed as impractical before the invasion, pored over the transmitted data with growing excitement. "It's exactly as my equations predicted," she explained to Admiral Washington over a secure channel. "The Craxians are manipulating subspace fields to create localized distortions in normal spacetime. But their approach is, forgive me, almost primitive compared to what my team theorized." Washington's holographic image raised an eyebrow. "Primitive. Their technology is centuries beyond ours." "In engineering, yes," Park conceded, "but in theoretical understanding. Their dimensional mathematics is elegant but narrow. They've developed along a single path of dimensional theory, refining it to perfection. But they've completely overlooked alternate approaches." "Can we counter it?" Washington asked simply. Park smiled. "Better, we can reflect it." The Nairobi equations developed by Dr. Kamau's team described dimensional resonance patterns that could effectively create a mirror for their weapons effect. If we can deploy enough field generators in the right configuration. "How many generators? What kind?" "That's the beautiful part," Park replied. "We don't need specialized equipment. The field effect can be created using modified gravitational sensors, the same type used in mining operations in Neptune's rings." Washington's eyes widened with understanding. "We have a dozen ice mining vessels stationed in Neptune's rings as an early warning system." "Exactly," Park nodded vigorously. "Their standard equipment can be reconfigured to generate the necessary field pattern. It won't stop the weapon completely, but it could redirect the effect back toward its source." As the inevitable dominance approached Neptune, Zextoral observed unusual movement in the planet's rings. Several small vessels, identified by their transponders as civilian ice mining ships, appeared to be repositioning. "Scan those vessels," he ordered dismissively. "Likely an observational force." "No threat." His sensor officer complied. "Minimal power signatures, High Commander. No weapons detected. They appear to be standard resource extraction vessels." Zextoral nodded, returning his attention to preparation of the dimensional cascade device. "These worthless human ships come to witness their world's end," he announced to his bridge crew with reinstated confidence. "Let them watch our might unleashed." The command to fire died on his lips as the mining vessels simultaneously activated their modified equipment. What appeared on Craxian sensors as a series of gravitational anomalies was actually the deployment of Dr. Park's dimensional resonance field, creating a perfect reflective pattern in the fabric of space-time itself. The inevitable dominance shuddered as its dimensional cascade weapon powered to maximum. Energy readings spiked as the device prepared to release its reality warping effect. But as the weapon discharged, the energy didn't propagate toward Earth as intended. Instead, it encountered the invisible pattern created by the mining vessels and rebounded. Zextoral watched in horror as dimensional energies cascaded back through his mighty flagship, the fabric of reality itself seeming to fold and ripple through the vessel's structure. Bulkheads twisted into impossible geometries as localized space-time distortions propagated through deck after deck. "Shut it down," he roared, but it was already too late. The diplomatic chamber aboard the EDF Reconciliation had once been a luxury dining hall on the cruise vessel Pacific Majesty. Now, hastily retrofitted with salvaged Craxian translation systems and Earth's most advanced communication technology, it served as the site of humanity's first formal diplomatic exchange with an alien civilization. High Commander Zextoral, now simply Zextoral, his rank stripped by his own government following his unprecedented defeat, sat rigidly in a specially constructed chair designed to accommodate his physiology. Across from him, Admiral Leah Washington and Commander Jackson Hayes led the human delegation, accompanied by Dr. Isabella Morgan, whose expertise in xenobiology had proven invaluable in understanding the Kraxian physical requirements. "The terms are not negotiable," Washington stated firmly, her voice clear despite the fatigue evident on her face. "Your remaining vessels will withdraw beyond the Kuiper Belt. All damaged Kraxian ships within our system become the property of Earth's combined governments. Knowledge exchange will be carefully regulated through newly established diplomatic channels." Sextoral's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep contemplation that Dr. Morgan had identified during her preliminary studies. His once gleaming ceremonial armor was scarred and dented, a physical reminder of his narrow escape from the inevitable dominance before the dimensional cascade tore the mighty vessel apart. "Your terms are unexpected," he finally replied, his words translated by the hybrid human-Kraxian system. "The Imperium has subjugated 17 species across 8 sectors. Never have we offered such balanced terms to a defeated opponent." Hayes leaned forward, his expression controlled but intense. "We are not defeated, Sextoral. Your dimensional weapon failed. Your fleet is reduced to less than 30 functional vessels. Earth stands ready to continue this conflict if necessary." The former High Commander studied Hayes with all 4 eyes. "My statement was not clear. I referred to the Imperium's defeat, not yours." He paused, seemingly struggling with a concept. "Your species has achieved something unprecedented in our history." The human delegation exchanged glances, but remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "Your vessels were worthless," Sextoral insisted, raising a clawed hand to forestall objections. "By every metric of evaluation, the Imperium has developed over 12 centuries of expansion. Your technology was primitive, your military doctrine chaotic, your defensive capabilities insignificant. Yet you prevailed. This contradicts all established patterns." Dr. Morgan stepped forward, a neural scanner discreetly monitoring the alien's physiological responses. "May I ask a question about Kraxian neurobiology?" Sextoral inclined his head in assent. "Your species evolved from hive-based ancestors, correct? Your neural architecture still shows patterns consistent with collective problem-solving rather than individual innovation." The alien's eyes widened slightly, the equivalent of human surprise. "How could you determine this?" Morgan smiled. "Your brain structure physically optimizes for perfect execution of established patterns rather than creating new ones. Your technological advancement came through meticulous iteration over millennia, not through revolutionary leaps." "Your assessment is accurate," Sextoral acknowledged. "The strength of the Imperium lies in our perfect unity of purpose, our ability to refine and execute established strategies with unmatched precision." Washington nodded thoughtfully. "While humanity's strength comes from our chaos, our competing nations, our contradictory approaches, our willingness to try unlikely solutions when conventional ones fail." "You didn't just defeat me," Sextoral said, echoing his earlier private realization. "You defeated our understanding of how intelligence functions in the universe." The Imperium's Council of Hierarchs is reevaluating many long-held assumptions. As he spoke, the display screen behind him activated, showing a transmission from the approaching Kraxian diplomatic vessel. The ornate markings on its hull indicated the presence of high-ranking representatives, the first diplomatic mission ever sent by the Imperium to a species it had intended to conquer. "The first delegation arrives tomorrow," Sextoral noted. "They will formally accept these terms and establish permanent diplomatic relations. This, too, is unprecedented." "Why?" asked Hayes directly. "Why offer us equality when you've conquered so many others?" Sextoral's answer was simple: self-preservation. He activated a small projector, displaying images captured during the conflict, human vessels incorporating Kraxian technology within hours of capturing it, civilian ships executing tactics no Kraxian commander would have conceived, mining equipment repurposed to counter the most advanced weapon in the Imperial arsenal. The hierarchy calculated that within one standard solar cycle, humanity would not only match Kraxian technology, but likely surpass it in unpredictable ways. Within 2 cycles, you would have reverse-engineered our faster-than-light drives and begun expanding beyond your system. The analysis suggested a 78% probability that continued conflict would result in the eventual collapse of the Imperium itself. A stunned silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. "So," Washington said finally, "it's not generosity that brings your diplomats, but fear." "Not fear," Zextoral corrected. "Recognition. For 12 centuries, the Imperium has encountered intelligence that follows predictable patterns. Your species represents something new, something we wish to understand rather than destroy." His mandibles clicked in what Dr. Morgan recognized as a gesture of ironic amusement. "Though your vessels were indeed worthless by our standards, they carried something of immeasurable value. Minds that think in ways we cannot predict." As the meeting concluded and plans were made for the arrival of the Crackshin delegation, Admiral Washington found herself on the observation deck, looking out at Earth gleaming blue and white against the blackness of space. Beside her, emerging from the shadows, Captain Olivia Rodriguez of the Peregrine joined her in silent contemplation. "It worked," Rodriguez said simply. Washington nodded. "Humanity's greatest weapon was never our ships or our technology. It was our unpredictability," Rodriguez finished. "Our chaotic, beautiful diversity of thought." Together, they watched as the stars overhead twinkled with new possibility and new caution. For humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy not through diplomatic overtures or peaceful exploration, but by teaching a powerful empire a humbling lesson. Never underestimate the worth of a Terran vessel or the humans who build them.